Oh my goodness, Matt Kahn, it's such an honor to be with you today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's truly an honor to be here with you.
Yeah, I have so much that I want to dive in and explore. One place where I would love to start is to ask you a little bit. I know you were from an early age set
Mm.
on your life mission, and I wanted to ask you about your journey growing up.
Well, it's a very interesting one because, I had my first awakening experience when I was 8. I had this out of body experience, met Jesus, didn't know who that was. And it set this, really big precedent of spiritual growth in my life. Although, interestingly enough, I would have these moments of knowing things without knowing why or how I knew it. But it wasn't actually until I was in my mid 20s where it all actually came to a head. So it was like I had this first moment when I was 8 that was like a foreshadowing of like, here's where you're going. And then I spent a lot of my life, marinating and developing an ego. So I would have something to wake up within or from. So I've had a very interesting journey of internalizing the feelings of other people
Mm.
and confusing it with what I thought they thought of me. So I didn't know I was an empath, didn't know I could feel people's energy. And so I spent most of my life really watching, and I started to spontaneously watch myself engage with other people as if I was taking notes for some in some way. And I started to notice that I would sense their energy and I would think it was what they thought of me. So then I went into this pattern of trying to make people feel better because I thought that's how they
Mm.
liked me or that's how I knew I was liked. And I would watch myself take responsibility for other people's experiences and almost try to heal other people's wounds so that there was less distance between my heart and theirs. And it wasn't until I went through a radical series of awakenings that a lot of this started to kind of get pieced together. But I would say growing up, it was a fact finding mission I didn't know I was on. And it was just learning to be in peace amidst tremendous emotional turmoil in my house with my family and just not knowing how to function while being buried underneath what felt like everyone else's emotions. And so it became the greatest training ground for the work I do. But looking back, it was um, a very, very intense journey. And, it was the journey of being a kid who would look at people who didn't seem to care about other people's feelings and almost feeling like, how do you do that? Because I knew I didn't know how to not care. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized it was actually quite a skill, but um, quite an intense journey getting here.
Yeah. I think of you as someone who is so heart centered, heart opened, and it sounds like you were that way from, since you came to this planet and, much before. But would you say there was a time where you really like shut that down, or did it continue really throughout your journey?
I would say that I've worked with a lot of people who have had definitive moments that could say, I remember the moment I shut this down, or I said, it's too much, I can't do it. I can say that I've had moments of feeling shut down, feeling overwhelmed, but something in me never shut this down. There was never a moment where I said, I can't do this. This is too much. Because even though my ability to feel felt super intense and overwhelming, that was the part of me that always felt like when I would be alone and spend time with me, that's what made sense. That was the sanity in a world. So I'd go to school, I try to interact with people. People didn't always make sense to me. Mean spiritedness didn't make sense to me. And I could really see how hurt people were and how cruel people became as a result of not feeling and facing those hurts. And I could feel how much people would suppress in themselves. And of course, there are many patterns in my upbringing where I would want to hide what I was feeling from other people. But there was never a time for me personally, and this is just the uniqueness of my journey, where I shut down. If anything, I would sit in my room and I would literally simmer in this energy, and it would be feeling like I'm being burnt alive.
Mm.
And for some reason, there never was an option in my mind of I should turn this off or I should turn away. And I think to the credit of my family's emotional turmoil, in my family, if you were in trouble, you got confronted and you got interrogated. And I remember saying to my family, like, I feel like I'm, being burnt alive. I'm going to go to my room and have some space. Oh no, no, we're not done with you. And so I grew up in a family where you weren't done until the person emotionally abusing you was done.
Mm.
Perfectly honest. And so I think I applied that to my spiritual journey. And I never really knew I had an option other than to face the fire because that's what I was constantly confronted with. So I learned to find peace in the fire. I learned to be the peace that was missing from the fire around me. But then it created this other interesting journey in my adult life where I actually didn't know how to be peaceful without needing fire around me,
Mm.
which
Wow.
is its own interesting thing. Like I know how to be very peaceful around fire. So when people are at their worst, when life is the most uncertain, if someone's on their deathbed, I am in a state of peace and I'm there doing my light work and I'm a good person to have around. But then I had to learn, how do I access that presence without needing an enormity of upheaval to balance against. And so that was actually the uniqueness of my journey, was instead of it being I shut something down and I'm going to turn it back on, it was how actually can I be one with this presence
Mm.
without needing something completely opposite to help me balance.
It's fascinating. What profound experiences as, preparation, truly. And I was just having this conversation about the elements and how often, you mentioned the fire and you have just this grounding earth energy. So it sounds like, cultivating that peacefulness regardless of what the external circumstances are. And then I imagine boundaries were something that you really needed to cultivate. Was there anything else that was really pivotal on your journey at that time?
Yeah, I would say that, and this is a funny thing for me to say, but I think for people listening, it's just, I love how every time I do a dialogue or something new comes out or different, so this has a different energy. But I would say that because a lot of people will sit there and say, well, how can I be this peaceful? How can I be this heart centered? And I think the biggest misunderstanding about it is that I think that when the ego tries to be heart centered, it's an option the ego has to choose from. So in my household, there was no turning away. Like in my household, to be perfectly honest, there was no such thing as boundaries. If I took boundaries in my family, I was accused of not being a part of the family. And if you live under this roof, you play by our rules. And if we want to talk to you, you're going to talk to us. And I
Mm.
lived. So I actually didn't know what a boundary was until I became an adult and started doing this work. And having no boundaries, having no personal space unless someone's ego didn't have anything they wanted to pick apart in me, um, allowed me to spend a lot of time alone when I was a kid. So for me, what I craved was alone time. And in the alone time, I kind of cultivated this presence that I didn't know I was cultivating. But I would say that I don't know if I would have become as deeply steeped in my presence and heart centered if I had boundaries, because I think in my life, the moment I would have felt discontent or friction, I would have said, ooh, that's beginning to hurt. I need to be away from you. And I actually wouldn't have become as strong as I am. And although I could say it feels like I have been ripped apart throughout my entire life over and over again, in that it actually dissolved out of me the part that needs boundaries to hide from. And again, I don't disqualify boundaries because some of us are in relationships with people that are harming us and we
Mm.
need boundaries. And I'm sure I would have had a far more healthy upbringing if I had boundaries. I just don't know if I would have become as incredible as I am at the work that I do. So
Yeah.
just to be perfect, just as an honest conversation, like I respect boundaries and I think they're awesome. And um, I think it's actually really interesting that I grew up with no boundaries. That became the space that actually made like woke up in me this like seemingly invincible, I can fall, I can crumble, but I get back up and I'm reborn.
Yes.
And I think that if I had boundaries, I would be far more fragile. And I feel a presence within me that is always open and relaxed. And so for me to be a loving person, it's not because, and I want people who are listening to this to understand, I'm not this person because I choose love in every moment. I don't choose love. Love is what's left in me.
Mm.
There's a space where love flows through, and in human beings, it gets caught in a filter of pride.
Mhm.
And that pride wall is destroyed in you. It's either going to awaken your consciousness to become a vessel of love and peace, or it's going to cause you to be the very bully that victimized you in your earlier years. So I'm grateful that the breaking open for me brought out of me love, but it's not love that I choose. Like I don't find myself in moments where I go, you know, I could really be an a-hole right now. And boy, I'm craving being an a-hole. But you know what? I'm going to be bigger than that. After all, I'm Matt Kahn. So I don't. That's not my life at all. I never
Yeah.
do that. I don't make willful choices. There's just there is a space where defenses used to live and they're gone.
Mm.
And they have been burnt out of me. And so while I could say, wow, mom and dad in heaven, I sure wish you would have respected my boundaries. That's true on one level, but the bigger truth is, and thank you
Mm.
for preparing me for the work I'm here to do that you didn't know you were preparing me to do. And thank you, divinity, for crafting such a masterful play that beyond any type of comprehension imaginable. I mean, it's really quite humbling. So I can really talk to both sides of it.
Mm. It's beautiful. And I'm so grateful that you touched on that ingredient of spaciousness
Yeah,
because I feel like that's so important to realize, especially as an empath, what is mine versus what is the collective, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. I agree, and I think just because I'm just thinking about this all very different. For some reasons was coming up, but if I had the time to be alone as a kid in spaciousness, and that's part of cultivating presence, but then I had the ability to create boundaries, I for sure would have been a cult leader for sure. Because that's where the imbalance is. So I got to be alone. God was merciful there, and then
Yeah.
God again. By the way, this is a coffee break. Now you got to go see the monsters again, and
Yeah.
they're blow fire and burn you and torch you again. And that combination of I can't hide from this fire and I feel the best when I'm alone was the perfect ingredient for me to literally spend most of my childhood transmuting and preparing my body for the process of awakening. And not that any of us should be in a volatile environment, but if you find yourself around volatility, there is a higher purpose for what is unfolding, which includes being able to have boundaries, which, of course, at the end of my parents' life, I was able to express boundaries, and that was quite a moment of redemption. But if I could have had boundaries and my solitude, I don't think I would have been this guy. And so I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that I had the space when I did. And again, it took a long time, but I figured out I think a lot of the feelings I'm processing are not mine. I
Mm.
think it's just my tendency to overcompensate for the lack of heart centered connection that I have with people. And I overcompensate by storing part of their pain in my body as if it's going to help lighten their load so I can have the kind of connection I want. So even in that, that's a form of control, right? I'm trying to control how heart centered someone is so I can experience the version of them I know is buried within them. And
Mm.
as an empath, we still have control to overcome and to heal, but it just plays out very differently in us.
It does. And that's so fascinating because one of the questions that I wanted to touch on and explore with you is about spiritual ego.
Yeah.
And, it's like, I know you've been recognized as one of the most spiritually influential people in the world. Incredible honor. And, you have just this, like I said, grounded, down to earth energy that doesn't feel superior. And I feel like that is so important as we move into this age of Aquarius, where really, the age of the guru is no longer needed, or, no longer being really embraced by the collective. And so can you speak to that a little bit and how you see the spiritual ego kind of popping up in some instances?
Yeah, well, the ego in and of itself, every time I teach something, I always teach it differently. So I think I've defined the ego over 18 years, 18,000 different ways. And people are like, which one is it? But it's always, different angles of it. So ego is really what we develop in childhood as like a primal defense mechanism of patterns. It's where we try to, uh, we develop patterns to get the needs met that we can't seem to have met by our environment, but it's met by, or it's created by such a traumatized, wounded version of ourselves that all the ways that we try to overcompensate or get our needs met keeps us in survival mode. So spiritual ego is where we are still in survival mode, trying to have our needs met in the most unconscious and sometimes destructive ways, but just with spiritual ideas and spiritual justifications projected on it. So maybe someone drinks too much and they say, well, I was raised by an alcoholic father, and who am I to think I'm better than him, or whatever the thought's going to be. And then we have someone else who says, oh, I drink and, this is a phase I'm going through, but it's really grounding me in my body. So it's really the same pattern. It's just a spiritual version of it. So the spiritual ego is the same patterning of our woundedness in childhood, just that has created a spiritual costume to hide in. And
That's
so it's the way we spiritually avoid. Um, this is what's interesting. When you're in a spiritual ego, you don't know that you're avoiding, you think you're being a spiritual person. But what's interesting is when you see it from a different perspective, the spiritual ego is always in avoidance of real spirituality, which is called reality. So the spiritual ego are the spiritual ways that we avoid reality. Like,
yeah.
for example, if you have someone in your life that you need to share something with, but they never listen or they respond with judgment, and you say, I can't talk to this person, and it's going to lower my vibration, which is a very spiritual thing to say, right? It's going to lower my vibration, and God forbid it lowers my vibration, and the FedEx department of God will not bring me my treats on time or send my beloved to my next door neighbor, and whatever it is. The truth is, when you're going to speak truth to someone who doesn't listen or who doesn't give you the warmest response, right? We don't feel safe because it's not going to be a comfortable experience. But real spirituality, which I call reality, is, can I develop such a safety in my connection to spirit that I can have an uncomfortable conversation without pretending that comfort or what's right is needing it to be the way I want it to be. So if I need to have a conversation with someone and I know it's not gonna be fun. I'm not talking to another Matt Kahn. I'm talking to someone who is going to project it right back on me. Can I take time to be so aligned in my spirit?
Mm.
Can I take time to be so connected that my safety is not their responsibility? My safety is within me.
Yes.
Right. So that's the difference. Is a spiritual ego will say, I can't talk to them. They need to wake up, and I'm going to be on my high horse. And until they read a few books and go to a Vipassana meditation retreat or whatever it is, right? There's a field, I'll meet you there, whatever, you know what I mean? All these things. The truth is, well, why have we manifested this experience? We've manifested this experience because we're always trying to transform any degree of weakness into a strength for greater
Mm.
benefit. So of course, if I'm not comfortable talking to someone who's not going to listen well, I'm going to be afraid. When I'm afraid, that means right now, when I'm afraid, I'm not as rooted in my spirit as I need to be to know the safety within me versus rely on someone else to make me safe when their job is just to be in their patterns.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a little time to be in my spirit, but then I'm going to have the conversation. And
Yeah.
so I think the spiritual ego is where we spiritually hide from life and we try to control our evolution versus letting life mold us into our most optimal frequency and into the masterpiece we're all here to remember that we are.
That's so good.
Thank you.
I saw a meme the other day that said I killed my ego and now I'm better than everyone. And I just thought that was so funny. And but I love how you explain that. And for me, it's like really truly connecting with unity consciousness, which is, regardless of where somebody is on their path, what the, religious or spiritual beliefs are, is really seeing everyone as equal.
Right. Right. And we're all equal, right? We're all special. And if we're all special, that kind of kills the special the ego wants because the ego wants to be very special. But we're all special. And yet we're all not at the same grade level. So it's just like if I'm walking on a school campus and someone at a different grade level comes up and says, "Can I have $100?" Nope. But hey, thanks for asking. Like we learn to engage with respect and humility. There's no judgment, but it's just you have to be a person. You have to be your own person. And if someone in your family is asking you something that doesn't feel good to you, yeah, I appreciate you asking. Can't do that. And I think one of the biggest things we can talk about, which I think is helpful, is that, and it's a broader teaching. I did once at a retreat where strengths are weaknesses and weaknesses are also strengths. So one of our biggest weaknesses is that we carry a wound of incapability. If something didn't turn out the way I thought it was, I must be incapable. I must not be good enough. If my parents aren't treating me a certain way, if I was perfect, it wouldn't happen, right? So we carry this wound of incapability. But the wound of incapability doesn't heal with all this extra special spiritual work that we do so much of. It actually heals by learning that incapability is actually a strength of authenticity. So if someone says, "I need you to do this," and it's just something you cannot do, I hear you. I am also incapable of fulfilling your requests, and I want you to know I won't be doing that, and I can't do that. But thanks for asking. And so I think that what keeps us from having honest conversations is that people want other people to be more honest, but they themselves are not really being honest because the honesty is I'm incapable of being who someone else needs me to be. And the truth is they're incapable of who we need them to be. So if we actually just met in discussing what are you incapable of doing for me and what am I incapable of doing for you, and if we decide we still want to work on this, now we're in a relationship. But if we talk around this stuff and we're like, well, I'm going to talk like a spiritual ego and I'm going to try to be their life coach and get them to heal so they can do what I need them to do, that's not truth. Truth is asking someone, are you capable of doing this thing that I would love to have in a partner? Yes or no? And then my turn, by the way,
Yeah.
what you want from me? Couldn't do in a million years. Is this what we still want? If it is, let the comedy continue. If not, let's be honest. So I think incapability, and it doesn't mean, when I say incapability, it doesn't mean that all of us are capable of achieving anything we want, but we're capable of achieving anything we want over a period of time. In every moment, you're capable of something and you're incapable of something, and all you have to do is be honest about it. And what will fall, what will come, and it's all being done by spirit within you. All you have to do is be honest on a gangster level with some compassion that says, thank you for asking. I can't do that for you. Right question to the wrong recipient. Every no, yay, a little thing pops up. Every no gets you one step closer to the right yes. So if someone calls me and asks me for a favor that I just don't have the ability to do, I'm sorry, I won't be able to do that. Thank you for asking. And I know that you're going to find the person that's meant to fulfill that for you. And if that destroys a relationship, what relationship did I ever have?
Yeah. So good. I I love this.
Thank
I mean,
you.
and I love how you normalize the deep emotions. We're moving into, I feel like, the age of transparency where, authenticity, vulnerability, these are, and we can't hide anymore. I feel like where we're moving, it's like everything is kind of coming to the surface,
Yeah.
which is fascinating as well, because I feel like you wrote the book Whatever Arises. Love that. Really
Yeah.
ahead, ahead of our time. And
Oh,
it's
yeah.
it's just it's so good. There's a gene key. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the gene
Yeah.
keys, but with the gene keys, the 59th gene key is about transparency
Mm.
and really moving into greater intimacy as, individually, and then of course that's mirrored in the collective. But what's interesting is the shadow of that key is superficiality.
Mhm.
And when I think of that, it's just really the inability to express on a deeper level, and perhaps we haven't had that practice. So, I feel like what you're sharing really encourages us to have this level of honesty, openness, just sharing whatever your experience is true in that moment.
Absolutely. I love that distillation. I know the gene keys well. I mean, I know of them. Um, but I would say what's interesting is, especially in the spiritual field, when we have a spiritual ego, we misunderstand transparency as let me share with you the collection of projections and judgments I've imagined about you, which is not what honesty is. Like, here's what I think about you. No, that's actually that's actually just a mirror of what you've either thought of yourself or someone has thought about you. But when we talk about honesty, honesty is, am I projecting onto someone else more than they are capable of being? Right? If they were capable of being it, I'd have nothing to project onto them. So there's the tip off.
Mhm.
By letting someone know who I am, where I stand, am I being honest with someone in my life as I am with myself? And maybe it starts with I have to be more honest with myself so I can be more honest with other people. Or am I just trying to hold together ideas? I don't want to share this information. We just met, we're dating, it's going really well. That would ruin things if I shared that. So we don't want to bring a negative into it, right? We don't want to lower the vibration. And all these ways in which we avoid. And I think that the greatest thing we can all do is we can remind each person in our life of who they're in a relationship with and give them the right to decide whether that works or doesn't work for them.
Mm.
And so I remember early in my life, in my adult life, when I started to really get onto this, because I was raised in a family with volatility and manipulation. And so early in my life, I learned to out manipulate the manipulation just to stay safe. And then I realized as a young adult, I had all these manipulative patterns within me that were very sophisticated and very, like, I knew how to get what I wanted in a very manipulative way when I was very young.
Mm.
And so the result of me being this loving person is because I also turned myself inside out over a period of years and really did some intense work because I realized that's how I survived my family, but that's not how I want to function in my adult life. That's not how I want to represent myself. That's not the man I'm proud to be.
Mm.
And I started a practice many, many years ago where my spiritual practice, which I didn't even call it that, but my spiritual practice was one interaction at a time. Can I be 100% honest with each person I interact with? Can I not tell a story? And can I just be real? So then, because I remember when I was really young and people would say, how are you doing? I'm great, because I want them to see me as great.
Mhm.
And then I remember I'd started this practice. And so they would say, how are you doing? And if I was sad, I would say, well, I'm just kind of processing some sadness, even though my fear is no one wants to be around a sad person. You got to be amazing, right? And I would say that. And maybe you would cut the conversation short because the person I was talking to didn't know how to change my sadness. So they felt incapable. So they were trying to distance themselves from their incapability by getting away from me. And I had to deal with that. Or, how you doing? I really don't know how I'm doing. I'm just kind of letting it come up. And then it was like, oh my God, am I allowed to say I don't know how I'm feeling? Are we allowed to say that? And then I was like, no, that's actually an answer because it's real.
Yeah.
So I had to kind of reteach myself reality and like, I'm allowed to actually just be honest without first anticipating the reaction and trying to control the response. That was really big for me. And so now I live a life where I can be on stage in front of all these people or with you, and I can bare my soul and talk about my deepest things because it just feels good to be that way. But I didn't know it felt good to be this way. I had to like I had to reteach it to myself because I was raised that you have your experience, you have the way you want your experience to be to get the response you desire. And I had this masterful pattern in me, and I just saw it, and I realized, and I didn't know why, but I was like, I think this is completely a liability to the type of person that I'm here to become in my life. And it was really big. It was
It's,
really honest. It was sobering. And so I had that going on while I was having big spiritual experiences. And so my spirituality wasn't this like fantasy that took me away from that work. It actually was all a part of the same thing. And I'm grateful for that because as someone who sees energy, as someone who talks to guides, as someone who has astral projection experiences, I still you have to be a fully functioning human being. And I think that the spiritual ego, we kind of go back and forth.
yeah.
I think when you're integrated, you really have all of it. And it really, it's just a blessing to be honest. And it's so freeing. And then the big realization is my honesty is my best offering to every relationship. And my level of honesty is actually what determines the quality of my experience in all relationships.
Mm.
That's a big one.
It's huge, and it really resonates for me personally. I feel like anybody that maybe grew up with a lot of emotional turmoil, you
Yeah,
maybe like suppressed your own state of being to, keep the peace. And so to be able to give yourself permission to
right.
feel, to express, to take up space.
Well, and how weird is it? And I say weird just from my experience, looking back in my life, that I used to try to give people the answers to impress them. And now I'm this spiritual guy, right? The spiritual person in the field. I'm leading retreats and I work with people. And I can actually tell frequency wise when I'm asking someone how they're doing, when it's what they think they should say versus what is, right? You can feel the difference.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting when I'm experiencing my own historical pattern as someone trying to impress the teacher, whatever role I'm playing, or I need to be seen as farther along than I am. I can't say what really is. I am fully present and I am right. Like when you can say I'm right where I'm supposed to be and you're about to burst into tears. And I say that fully. Like I think we're ready for a spirituality where, of course, there is no guru. I love that because everything's very collaborative now. And like my soon to be wife and I are going to be teaching together a lot, which is incredible.
Yeah.
But I think that also, like, we're at a point where we're getting over what am I supposed to say? What am I, or like if you lead a meditation, someone says, before I meditate, can you please tell me what I'm supposed to feel? And that takes away from the discovery of it,
Yeah.
right? We're waking up out of a world where I know what I'm supposed to think, I know what I'm supposed to feel, I know what I'm supposed to say. And those are the type of people that always complain that other people aren't authentic. And so spirituality right now is going through this authenticity detox where it's not about playing a character, it's not about wearing certain clothes, it's about how connected are you to yourself? And how willing are you to step beyond the edge of your boundary or the edge of your comfort,
Yeah.
fueled by the safety of spirit? How much of you will you allow into your life? And can you do that on a level you never knew was possible if relying solely on the spirit that is always present within you? And I think that's where spirituality is going. And it's such a beautiful thing to watch.
It's so beautiful. And I have, chills because I feel like what you're describing is really us moving from, for lack of better term, from 3D to 5D
Right.
consciousness and beyond, where we're really letting the heart lead the way. And when that's safe to express, I mean, not only are we able to deepen our journey with ourselves, but then also within relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's where we find spirituality, like be in your own experience, cultivate connection, and then when you're around other people, take it for a test drive
Mm,
and check your math a little bit, right? And then the beauty is when I'm by myself, I bask and marinate in the light of spirit that allows me to remember how whole and complete I always am, no matter the process I'm in or what healing's occurring. And then when I'm around other people, all of the presence and light that I've cultivated become gifts that I share with other people to remind them of the spirit always within them. And then equally, they reflect to me the uniqueness of how spirit takes shape and form. And so it's like when I'm in my own private space, how much more love can I cultivate? And then when my wife and I come together again, I have a great gift to provide her. And
yeah.
I have more space in myself to receive the gift she has to provide. So it's a beautiful thing where we can be grounded, we can be expanded, we can be multidimensional, without it being a thing. And I think that what's going to be really fascinating as we evolve communities in this direction. So a lot of spiritual egos think if we don't talk about our process, we're having superficial conversations. And I think what we're going to start noticing more and more is that if everything is spirit, then perhaps spirit is dressed up as people who don't seem to care about spirituality to actually give us balance so that we don't live in our process. Like when I'm around people, I'm not talking about my process.
Yeah.
I don't even talk about my process with myself half the time, to be honest. And when you're in a spiritual ego, the only thing you talk about with yourself is your process. The only thing you want to talk with other people about is your process, and the only interest you have in other people is their process. And then,
Totally.
and if they don't want to really talk about it, you go, they're avoiding, they're bypassing, they're superficial. No, we're being given a coffee break from the mania of our spiritual obsession, and so it's so interesting when you can see it from different perspectives.
Yeah. And I feel like what you're really speaking to is like back when, you were saying somebody can say something to you, but you feel their energy,
Right.
you feel
Right.
their frequency. So it's not as much sharing a process, but even just sharing the energy of love, the frequency of peace, of joy, of tranquility can be so powerful and healing.
Right. And as an example, if I'm talking to someone, and I had this experience once, not recently, but I had this experience once where I was talking to someone and I knew the person was lying to me. And I knew it. I knew it. Every signal inside of me, I knew they were lying to me. But lying to me means that that person is not ready to face their own truth.
Mm,
Now, did I give them what they wanted? No. Did they ask me for something? Of course they did. Did I say yes? I said, no, thank you, because I'm not going to say yes to someone I know who's lying to me.
mm.
But I also didn't have to call them on the lie, because if they're lying to me, they're not ready to face their truth. And if they're not ready to face their truth and I call them on it, I'm trespassing on their field.
Yeah.
I don't let them abuse me. I don't let them take advantage of me. Whatever they're going to ask me is going to be a no in the presence of lying. And of course, I would never be in a committed relationship with someone that has that pattern.
Right.
But I think, and of course, that's the only caveat is if you're in a relationship where that keeps showing up, maybe, should really question the relationships you have. But you can actually be present with someone who's lying to you You're not going to say yes to what they ask. So they're not a liability. You're just like, while I'm in their presence, this person is totally afraid of their own truth. And
Yeah.
I have passion for that. If they had said, by the way, Matt, what do you think I should do with my life? Well, you should stop lying to my face. They didn't ask me that. They didn't give me consent. And so there's a way where we can learn to have compassion for other people's experiences. We don't have to put ourselves in a position to be, to be taken advantage of by people.
Yeah.
But I think that truth is not for us to project onto other people. Truth is for every person to come to terms with. And I think if we're coming to terms with our own truth, and if we're speaking our own truth, which doesn't have to be about other people, even if you're in a relationship where someone's being abusive and you say, I need to leave, this is not good for me. There's a difference between saying, this is not good for me, and here's what you won't stop doing. So
Yes.
the truth about you always, and it becomes such a different reality to live in.
Yeah, which is such a great key for having conscious conversations and relationships. And I know you're about 3 weeks away from getting married, which is so exciting. Um, you know, I'll share just really transparently. When I was getting married, which was, I don't know, 5.5 years ago, one of my greatest fears was to take another magical, magnificent being for granted over time. That journey of like, oh, I see you every day, the newness wears off. And it just was my fear at that time, and now I know, I can see it a little bit differently, but I just want to ask you from that perspective, especially with working together and having such a beautiful divine partnership. What is your experience and your approach to relationships?
Interesting question. I would say that for both of us, and of course I can only speak for myself right now, but every day of my life is a new lifetime. So we wake up and we choose each other, and we go to bed, and that this day is over, this lifetime is over, and we allow each day to be its own lifetime of recommitment.
It's
And
beautiful.
we only want what's best for each other. So, for example, hypothetically, if she woke up one day and says, I'm just not feeling it anymore, sure, I would feel a lot of things. But as someone who loves her unconditionally, I would want to participate in helping her have everything she needs to thrive. And so if what helps her thrive is my presence, what a lucky man I am.
Hmm.
And if what would help her thrive more is my absence, I'm humble enough to know the difference. And for both of us, it's the same way. I mean, I don't think about that, and she doesn't think about that. And I think because I've gone through such awakenings, and I feel like I live my life in death's doorway anyway. Like, when you go through a very deep awakening, you don't want to die. And I think there are people that confuse suicidal tendencies with being awake. It's not that you want to die. It's that you found death's doorway before death found you.
Hmm.
And so you're experiencing this lifetime in the doorway of death. You're experiencing life on a profound edge. And I feel like I sit on the furthest edge that keeps me in this world, to allow me to be a channel of heavenly energy into this world.
Yeah.
And so for me, endings aren't things I look forward to, but endings aren't things I fear. Um, and if endings aren't what you fear, beginnings aren't as outrageous anymore. And that's what's really scary for people. They go, because in the beginning, the newness of a relationship is exciting. But sometimes the excitement of the beginning creates an equal fear for the ending.
Mhm.
If you don't have fear for the ending, you don't have that mentally drug induced
Hallelujah.
opioid high of, how when you first come together and you're in love, and we have that. She and I definitely have that, but we didn't have the beginning that a lot of people assume everyone has because of our relationship with endings.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, when they wake up, get really scared. They go, nothing gives me the high anymore. I'm not excited about something. And God forbid you're on a spiritual journey that says you can't manifest until you figure out what you desire, which is not true at all. And then people go, I don't know what I desire. I don't feel anything. I feel flat, because desire is very different when you are awake. It's very different. It's not in the old way. Desire is that, caffeinated buzz that gives you a break from a life of hardship and torment. When you're awake, you are in such great relationship with endings that beginnings are nice.
Mhm.
They're beautiful. They're exquisite, but it doesn't have the same fantasy or allure. And so the ego gets very afraid of life without fantasies to hide it.
Yeah.
Or like the idea of when I'm high on love, and then we settle into everyday life love, and it stops feeling as magical, people think they're losing connection. Or like if I bought a car and the minute the car stops smelling like that new car smell, what's wrong? I think the car's breaking down. Or if I'm a computer and I'm downloading files, and every time it goes to like turn off to turn back on to, and I go, whoa, something's wrong, I got to re-download. And
Yeah.
so we try to stay in the same part of the evolutionary cycle instead of understanding the whole cycle. So it's like trying to stay in certain seasons, like let's stay in summer and spring and screw fall and winter. And let's call that a spiritual ego.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting for us because both of us are so, like, we love each other. We are each other's forever person, right? We never want to be apart. At the same time, in our lives, we have such a relationship with death and endings that it just makes it very different. And I think that when you get really high in the beginnings and you fear the endings, any kind of conflict becomes like, here it is. Here it is, the thing I'm so freaked out about. And so you really get liberated from that, the fear of loss. And if anything, she and I came to this relationship knowing we're starting a relationship. So there has to be a point where we end the relationship. And that doesn't mean we break up. God forbid one of us goes to the other side first. I mean, life will be what it will be. But I think we came into our relationship having processed that.
Yeah.
And so now everything is just extra for us. So every day, like true story, every day at least 4 times a day, 5 times a day, I propose to my soon to be wife.
Oh,
I
I love.
propose every single day, 4 times a day. We were on a hot air balloon a couple of days ago, proposed her in the sky, hadn't done that. And I do it every day as a romantic gesture. And every day that we're married, I will propose to her every single day throughout the day. And we both do this together. And so as I say this, people could hear this and go, God, that could sound kind of, and yet we have the most romantic, passionate, fully functioning relationship that, on
I
every
feel it.
level.
Yeah, I feel
But
it.
we are so good with how life cycles that for us, this is all just extra. It's so I hope that all makes sense.
Oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. And it like, I feel like there's an element of when you're saying, beginnings and endings is about the control, like surrendering to the relationship, not controlling the seasons, not wanting to control your partner, but just awakening every day in the present moment of embracing the love that is. And what a beautiful way to live.
Well, if we really come into the reality of my partner is not designed to be who I need them to be, but who they need to be. And I'm not designed to be who they need me to be. I'm designed to be who I need to be. The right relationship is who I need to be and they need to be work.
Yeah.
This idea that if I do this and you do this, we can both be who each other need. Like that's how you like compromise, even though like in third dimension, compromise was like this really positive thing. Compromise is how people who are not meant to be together don't kill each other. When you are in the right partnership, who I need to be for myself works for my wife.
Yeah.
She loves every, hey, and who she needs to be for her works for me. And there is never a day where who I need to be and who she needs to be doesn't work for either of us. There never has been a moment because that's who we're in a relationship with. It wasn't like I met her and I go, oh, I can, this will be easier to get her to be who I need to be.
Yeah.
I fell in love with who she is, and she fell in love with who I am. And so, who we need to be for our own journeys happens to be what fulfills us both. That's a right relationship. And so, when two people are trying to figure out how to make something work, it's not working.
No.
And can we allow the spiritual journey to be an opportunity to be honest with ourselves and honest with others? And even if it leads to a transformation where it's the best relationship possible, I'm not saying everyone has to break up with everyone, but can we actually recreate relationships in the name of truth on a daily basis?
Mm.
Right? My wife is not designed to be who I need her to be. And thank God I don't need her to be other than how she is. And
Yeah.
vice versa. And we wake up, it's great, right? Some days I'm in a process, some days she's in a process, and it's actually fine and it's great. And there's nothing lacking in our relationship because I don't have a way for her to be, and she doesn't have a way for me to be. We're just blessed to be walking this journey together.
That's so good. So beautiful. Now, I want to ask you about your documentary, Healed by Love.
Woo.
Such a beautiful creation. And I'm